So Donald J. Trump, you may have heard of him, had a glorious reunion today with Benjamin Netanyahu, who's been touring the United States after delivering his rousing address to Congress that received so many standing ovations that I don't even think our most advanced mathematicians have been able to compute the total number of them. So let's take a look at Trump and Bibi reuniting. It's so wonderful. It's so heartwarming. Here they are, Trump and Bibi down at Mar-a-Lago, shaking hands. Wow. It really brings joy to my heart. You may recall that Trump at least professed to have bad blood for a while with Benjamin Netanyahu, not on any policy level, meaning not because Trump had any objection to anything Netanyahu was actually doing governmentally or politically or in any other real important fashion, but because Trump was annoyed that Bibi sent a note of congratulations to Joe Biden after the 2020 election. So that was the grudge that Trump had allegedly been nursing for all this time, but apparently they buried the hatchet officially today, and you can see them clasping hands and rubbing up against each other. And was there a smooch involved? We don't know. We'll have to wait for the leaks that may emerge from the waitstaff at Mar-a-Lago. Now, I'm a very peculiar person, so I am a subscriber to the official Prime Minister's office press release list from Israel, and they sent some additional photos for us all to gaze at with wonder. So here's another one from today's meeting that I found fascinating. That's Netanyahu, I guess, telling Trump a bedtime story, reading from a book. And this meeting took place in the morning, so maybe it was an early bedtime for Trump today, maybe for a nap, or maybe he didn't sleep at all. Maybe Trump has the stamina that he could withstand Bibi reading aloud to him without dozing off. But if you look a little closely at that book, by golly, I think I recognize it. That is Bibi. The book is titled Bibi, and it's Benjamin Netanyahu's memoir. Wow. Now again, because I'm very peculiar, I fully admit that, Internet, I've actually read significant portions of the memoir Bibi, because I do all my diligent research for the edification of you, the viewer at home. And there's a really fascinating passage in the Bibi memoir that I couldn't help but revert back to in my own mind as I was pondering the significance of this event. So here's what Netanyahu reveals Trump, quote, blurting out around the time that they first met in Israel in 2017. If you recall, after Trump assumed office in 2017, one of his first major international trip was to Saudi Arabia and then Israel. So two of our most magnificent allies. And Bibi recalls Trump blurting out, quote, Bibi doesn't want peace. Wow. So apparently, as per Netanyahu's recollection, I guess this was relayed to him secondhand, Trump blurted something out that maybe had a small kernel of truth to it, which is that Bibi doesn't want peace, meeting with the Palestinians. And it's hard to contest that one. I don't even think Bibi's staunchest supporters would dispute that Bibi is not terribly interested in forging some kind of settlement with the Palestinians. Rather, they cheer because Benjamin Netanyahu wants to keep that conflict going for as long as possible for political and geostrategic and perhaps even religious reasons. So what happened after Trump was said to have blurted that out is, again, terribly fascinating. Netanyahu showed Trump a video of Mahmoud Abbas, who is the head of the Palestinian Authority, basically a powerless figurehead who represents the pittance of what constitutes Palestinian representative government, at least in the West Bank. And he showed him a video, and Trump said, wow. Trump was appalled that what was portrayed on that video contradicted what Trump had gathered from having met Abbas in Washington. Trump said, quote, he seemed like such a sweet and peaceful guy. Now, this video was a fabrication according to Rex Tillerson, who was then Trump's Secretary of State. Remember, Rex Tillerson, the CEO of ExxonMobil, was appointed Secretary of State by Trump in the early part of his first administration. He would go on to be fired by tweet by Trump and then replaced with Mike Pompeo, who is one of the very few top administration officials that Trump seemed to get along perfectly fine with. Most of the rest of them, Trump had this petulant falling out where they were bickering with one another, and Trump would unceremoniously fire them, including Tillerson by tweet, but Pompeo not so much. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu displayed a fabricated video to Trump in order to change Trump's mind on the feasibility of some kind of diplomatic settlement to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And Netanyahu came up with a conclusion from that encounter, at least per his memoir that was released a couple of years ago, and which I very peculiarly read. Netanyahu says, Trump didn't like being taken for a fool. I hope the video will mitigate further bonding during his scheduled meeting with Abbas in Bethlehem on the final day of the trip. So Netanyahu is trying to undermine whatever good rapport Trump might develop or continue with Abbas on a later segment of his trip. And let's go to the next part of this excerpt from the book. Netanyahu recounts that he was able to soundly convince Trump of his own position being the right one because he likened the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to golf. Netanyahu said, peace with the Emiratis is a 5-foot putt. Peace with the Saudis is a 30-foot putt. And peace with the Palestinians is a hole-in-one through a brick wall. Excuse me. So Netanyahu was really pleased with himself for likening the Middle East conflict to golf. Netanyahu determined that that's an analogy that really resonated with Trump, and he was probably correct on that score. And here's the best part. This one tickles me to this day. Following this meeting between Bibi and Trump at the King David Hotel, by the way, site of what could only be described, if you want to use the word terrorist attack to describe anything, the King David Hotel was bombed by ardent Zionist militia groups in the run-up to the founding of Israel, when these ardent militia groups were trying to expel the British, who at that point ran the British Mandate of Palestine, which later became Israel once the self-proclaimed Zionists declared independence. So Netanyahu recounts that after this meeting at the King David Hotel, Trump went immediately to the Western Wall, the first American president to do so. Now, other presidents had, of course, visited the Western Wall, but Trump evidently was the first president to do so while in office. And isn't that a beautiful photo? That's Trump with his yarmulke fastened safely on his head, and he is definitely in a state of contemplation. Trump, we're told, is a very religious man, so I'm sure this was a moving experience for him, placing his fingers ever so gently and intently on that wall. Now, that's a really wonderful anecdote, and I'm so happy I get to share it with all you people because I want you to remember it for as long as you're alive. I'll probably remember it even in death. I'm not a particularly spiritual person myself. I'm not sure about the afterlife, but I hope if there is one, I will remember this anecdote above any others. Now, the ritual of American politicians going and placing their hands on the Western Wall is a well-established one. J.D. Vance, newly named Trump vice president, as he was gearing up his Ohio Senate candidacy in 2022, J.D. Vance evidently calculated that one of his primary stops on the campaign trail would have to be in Jerusalem, where he went and also donned the customary yarmulke and lowered his head in solemn contemplation and placed his hand on the wall. So that's J.D. Vance, and that was clearly the politically correct thing for him to do, politically astute, I should say, because it apparently fueled his ascendance first to the Ohio Senate seat when he obtained Trump's endorsement to win the Republican primary in Ohio over a slate of other Republican candidates, and then won the general election over a Democratic candidate, Tim Ryan, and now has been named the vice presidential nominee of the Republican Party at age 39, and is the youngest vice presidential nominee, I believe. I actually discussed this with Newt Gingrich at the Republican National Convention last week, because Newt Gingrich was telling me about how he had worked with Richard Nixon in Richard Nixon's post-presidency. They strategized with one another about how the Republicans would try to win back the House of Representatives, which they had been out of power in for decades. And then finally, Newt Gingrich unleashed his contract with America in 1994, and he won a majority in the House for the Republicans. And Newt told me that that was partially thanks to the guidance that was lovingly bestowed to him by Richard Nixon. But Richard Nixon ran in 1952 as vice president with Dwight Eisenhower, and he was also 39 or 40 at the time, so was quite young himself. Now that's just another kind of random historical aside from me that isn't really part of the narrative that I was trying to relay to you, but hey, you're stuck with me and all my oddball sensibilities for the time being. Now, I personally visited Israel for the first time in November of 2023, right after October 7th. I figured, hey, what better time to go voyage to the Holy Land? So I did some reporting, but I also said to myself, you know what, I'm here. I'm ready to go. I'm raring for a really fruitful visit. So I'm going to go visit the Western Wall. And so I did so. I went and sat. They have at the Western Wall in the old city of Jerusalem, they have white plastic lawn chairs that you can sit in, and you can just gaze at the wall, and you can also read various holy books. So I picked up a English language translation of the Torah. I read it for a while. You know, I didn't feel very much. I didn't feel like I was lifted by some supernatural spirit. I didn't feel like I was connecting to anything in particular. It was just a moderately interesting, I guess, landmark or point of interest to have visited. And I also didn't bring a photographer with me. So unlike J.D. Vance and unlike Trump and unlike all the other endless politicians who make that trek to the Western Wall, I didn't have the capacity to record my experience for posterity in case I have any political aspirations. So that tells you all you need to know about whether I'm ever going to get elected office. I always tell people I couldn't get elected dog catcher because I didn't even have the presence of mind to take a photographer with me to the Western Wall, although I guess I could have asked people to just take my iPhone and snap a photo of me as they were praying, but that seemed like it might have been a little bit uncouth, so missed opportunity. Now, another thing that I did, just to prove that I actually was there, there's me with my outrageous hair. Thankfully, I have been treated to the services of a stylist while I've been here in Brazil guest hosting for Glenn. So they did do some adjustments to my hair that makes me look, I guess, slightly more presentable. But there was me with a member of the Knesset who actually invited me to come to Israel, Moshe Roth. He's a self-described ultra-Orthodox member of the Knesset. And we had an interesting discussion about the Orthodox Jews' positions in the current Israeli government. And that's us in the Knesset right there. You can see the hostage posters that are plastered everywhere in Israel, and also lots of places, or at least they were, in the United States and Europe and so forth. So I just want to prove to you that it was in fact in Israel, and I wasn't just making that up, although maybe I could have just made it up and that would have also been funny. Now, Trump's meeting with Netanyahu is notable today because Trump has been testing this political line for the 2024 campaign that he is demanding for American Jews to switch their allegiance to Republicans so that he can be re-empowered and have a phenomenal second term in the White House. And one of the things that Trump has been doing, and I mentioned this a couple of days ago on the show, but I only paraphrased it. Thankfully, now we have the video. Let's go to the videotape. This is Trump. In May, he's outside the courthouse in Manhattan where he had his famous porn star payoff trial where he was convicted. I'm not going to relitigate that trial right now, but what's amusing for our purposes at the moment is that Trump gave one of his little press availabilities at the exterior of the courthouse there, and here's what he said.
That means it's Biden. That means it's election interference by Sleepy Joe, our dumb as a rock president, who's destroying our country with the borders and destroying our country with the worst economy, worst inflation, who allowed Russia to go in to attack Ukraine, who allowed Israel to be attacked, and now he's not even helping Israel. And Jewish people that go for Biden and the Democrats, they should have their head examined. Thank you very much.
So there you have it. Jewish people who vote for Biden and the Democrats should have their head examined. Now, what kind of examination is Trump proposing there? Because what Biden has done in office, who's still allegedly the president, has presided over the U.S. government's response to October 7th and the subsequent Israeli pulverization campaign in Gaza, and potentially even a forthcoming offensive that Israel may or may not launch, at least to a greater extent than it has so far, against Hezbollah in Lebanon. That could be in the offing. And Biden has provided more armaments to Israel in service of an ongoing war effort than any president ever. And I'm going to clap my hands for emphasis because I'm a little bit weird, but hey, you have to deal with it. And yet Trump and the Republicans, they've been all in on this idea that Biden and the Democrats are abandoning Israel. They're kowtowing to anti-Semites. They're embracing the so-called pro-Hamas faction of the Democratic Party, which we're told exists, but I think that's also questionable. So to distill that political talking point into one line, Trump says, effectively, and I'm paraphrasing here, I hope Trump does say this verbatim at some point because it would really make me rejoice. If you don't vote for Republicans, you ain't Jewish. So what does that remind you of? Let's also go to this next videotape.
Listen, you got to come see us when you come to New York, VP Biden.
I will.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
It don't have nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with the fact I want something for my community.
Okay, so there's Biden infamously saying in May of 2020, if you don't vote for me, if you don't vote for old Joe, you ain't black. So black people who might be Republicans or might have reservations about Joe Biden, they ain't black if they don't vote for him and if they vote for Trump. And Trump's just going with a variation on that theme, but with respect to American Jews, because although Biden has ceaselessly funded and armed and advocated to the greatest extent humanly possible, so far as I can ascertain, for Israel in the past 9 months, it's just not enough for Trump and the Republicans. So they're even going so far as to say that Jews, I guess, renounce their Jewishness if they vote for Trump. So let's look at the Trump-Vance official press release that came out of today's joyous meeting. Here's Trump and Vance, beautiful new logo, really concentrates the mind on their desire to get back there in the Oval Office. And they also say this toward the end. They go through all the incredible achievements that Donald Trump had in office for Israel. And the Trump campaign says that Trump expressed his solidarity with Israel. Gee, that was an open question, whether Trump would reaffirm his support for Israel. So mystery solved there. They say that Trump pledged that when he returns to the office, when he returns to the White House, he will make every effort to bring peace to the Middle East. Well, gee, isn't that heartwarming? I guess we don't have to know any more specifics about what that would actually entail. We can just rely on those handful of words and be comforted in the assurance that Trump will indeed bring peace to the Middle East. And Trump also says he'll combat anti-Semitism from spreading throughout college campuses all across the United States, because that's one of the gravest threats to America's national security. as we've established over the past couple months when college students decided to protest on campus because they were objecting to U.S. foreign policy and subsidizing and arming Israel in its pulverization campaign against Gaza. And Trump says when he gets in charge, he'll make sure to stamp out that expression of discontent toward U.S. foreign policy. Remember, those protesters are protesting against Biden, right? Biden's the one who's been running the policy portfolio, at least we're told, with regard to Israel. But Trump says we got to stamp out those anti-Biden protesters, which is interesting. But if you look at that statement from today's meeting, it says another thing that I want to call your attention to. One of the great highlights that Netanyahu thanked Trump for from when Trump was in office is eliminating Qasem Soleimani. That was the top general of Iran who Trump drone assassinated while Soleimani was on what was billed as a peace and reconciliation mission in Iraq. So Trump, Pompeo, and that whole crew, they orchestrated the drone assassination of one of the most preeminent figures in Iran, the leading military figure for sure in Iran, and they just offed him with one fell swoop of a drone strike. So I guess that was one of Trump's many anti-interventionist and peaceful military moves, and shows how against the military-industrial complex he is when he drone bombed Soleimani. That really bolstered that point. And I want to remind you of something that I thought at the time didn't get nearly enough attention, and it's clearly now been forgotten because J.D. Vance and Trump and all these other Republican surrogates for Trump, they love to herald Trump's drone assassination of Soleimani as one of his great achievements in apparently bringing stability to the Middle East. I mean, they forget that Iran actually retaliated against the U.S., or at least, Iran-connected militia groups in the region retaliated against the United States force presences there, gave lots of U.S. troops traumatic brain injuries through those retaliatory strikes. But, Trump ushered in an era of peace and tranquility and stability to the Middle East, I guess if you discount that whole episode and lots of others. But here is how the U.S. Department of Justice Office of Legal Counsel explained the justification for that January 2nd, 2020 drone strike assassination by Trump of Soleimani. They put out this whole memo, much of which was conveniently redacted. But in this second section here, they say something that is really incredible. They say that Trump relied on the 2002 AUMF for his drone strike assassination against Soleimani. Now, what is that? The acronym AUMF, it doesn't mean OMF. It means Authorization for Use of Military Force. And there are several of these that have provided purportedly justification for U.S. presidents to conduct warfare basically all around the world unhindered. There was the 2001 AUMF that was enacted almost universally after September 11th. But then this 2002 AUMF was separate. That was the authorization for use of military force in Iraq. That was the pre-Iraq war, 2003 invasion, the March 2003 invasion of Iraq to topple Saddam Hussein under George W. Bush, bring freedom and democracy to the Middle East, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That was the resolution that authorized that military campaign, at least as Bush and the Senate and the House would have had it at the time. And Trump's administration reached back into the archives 18 years and said, you know what gives Trump authorization to drone bomb the top Iranian general and just kill him in an assassination? The Iraq War resolution. So, the next time you hear one of these Republicans waxing poetic about how restrained Trump was in his conduct of foreign policy and how he ushered in this amazing era of stability and peace and tranquility and everybody singing Kumbaya throughout the Middle East, and he and Jared Kushner advised the Israelis and the Palestinians on how to get along, and everything would have been great if he hadn't been forced out of office in 2020 by narrow margins in Georgia, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. I don't know, remind them maybe that, I mean, you can pull up this clip if you want, or I'll send you the link to the Office of Legal Counsel advisory opinion, that Trump was still making use of the legal architecture around the invasion of Iraq in 2003 to launch deadly assassination drone strikes against hugely consequential figures in the Middle East as of 2020. And he still brags about it to this day. So that's yet another conundrum for us all to ponder. Now today, Trump said something, or yesterday rather, Trump did another one of his blurting out of something or other on Truth Social. I guess I'm a user of Truth Social now because I have to consult it semi-frequently just to read whatever Trump is railing about on any given day. And I only follow one person, and you can probably guess who that is. I don't know if there's really many others who are worth following on that site. For better or worse, I guess I'm a incorrigible partisan of Twitter/X, and I know that's a mouthful, but I'm still not ready to totally abandon the Twitter title. I guess it's just kind of embedded in my psyche, for better or worse, largely worse. But here's what Trump said on Truth Social yesterday. And this is bizarre. I still don't quite know what to make of this, so let me know if you have any suggestions. Trump says, if they do, quote unquote, assassinate President Trump, which is always a possibility, I hope that America obliterates Iran, wipes it off the face of the earth. If that does not happen, American leaders will be considered gutless cowards. And he has a little clip there of his good pal Bibi addressing the joint session of Congress earlier this week. Now, I guess that speaks for itself as to what Trump's designs are for a second term as relates to Iran. We've got these fairly dubious leaks about an assassination plot against Trump by some Iranian-backed forces that, as far as I know, haven't been corroborated by anything that any of us can journalistically or empirically verify. It's just these anonymous intelligence officials who whisper and leak things. And they had also claimed that there were similar assassination attempts or plots against John Bolton, Trump's former national security advisor, and Mike Pompeo, who are hardline anti-Iran zealots and had their agenda jointly enacted by Trump on that score. Now, I do want to review a lot of Trump foreign policy stuff on this show, given the priceless opportunity available for me. And I want to just, before we get to our first guest, I want to go through something that I think is connected just in terms of how under-examined it is, or how little recognized it is in terms of Trump and Afghanistan. So, Central Asia sort of connected in a thematic sense to U.S. interventions in that part of the world since 9/11. Remember, Trump had claimed that he wanted to get out of Afghanistan. But here's what he said on something called The Will Cain Show, a Fox News podcast of sorts, in June of this year. Let's hear that.
You know, we were going to leave, but we were going to keep Bagram, which is one of the biggest air bases in the world, cost us billions and billions of dollars to build many years ago. But we were going to leave because of China, because it's 1 hour away from it, where China makes its, forget about Afghanistan. It's exactly right next to China. It's exactly 1 hour away from where they make their nuclear weapons. Isn't that a great thing? We're going to keep it. Going to leave 4,000 people and keep it strong, right? They gave it up. They gave up everything.
So that's Trump criticizing Joe Biden for not just the way that Biden withdrew from Afghanistan, which you could have, I guess, logistical qualms with. That's Trump saying he was never going to withdraw from Afghanistan at all. He says he was going to leave 4,000 troops in Afghanistan, basically as a permanent occupying force. Now, do Democrats ever criticize Trump on that? Do the America First Republicans ever point that stuff out? Trump exists in this kind of vacuum where the actual stuff that he says and does from when he wielded power and when he's campaigning now, that is kind of rooted in reality, he never has to really answer for. People just have these fantastical visions of Trump that they criticize him for. So the liberals want to screech that he's going to destroy democracy, and because a bunch of yahoos mobbed the Capitol on January 6th, that means Trump is going to be a dictator and he's going to defy the 22nd Amendment and I guess stay in power for 2 or 3 or 4 more terms into his 90s, maybe even 100s. And likewise, the America First Republicans, you can't even get them to talk about this stuff hardly. They just want to tell you that Trump was just great in every respect, and yeah, he's America First, and America First can mean anything. I mean, I never heard of a term that has a more fluid definition than America First now, which includes, like not withdrawing from Afghanistan, being even more aggressively supportive of Israel, arming Ukraine, which Trump also did. And let's take a look at this figure from, this is from the Department of Defense. This is the number of airstrikes that the U.S. and its proxy force, the Afghanistan government, conducted from 2014 to 2021 in Afghanistan. Look at the far right totals there. Trump, that's Trump, 2017 through 2021. And I'm doing my little highlight thing because that's fun. Trump radically escalated U.S. and U.S.-backed airstrikes in Afghanistan under his tenure, more than Obama, as you could see, at least in the previous several years. And I don't know, is this even like in the domain of public knowledge? This is not some crazy, obscure statistic. I got this from the Pentagon's own data. It's like not that hard to find. But the average kind of America First Republican will say, oh yeah, Trump, he wanted to wind down U.S. presence abroad, and he's against the endless wars. He escalated them. Look at the data. Don't take my word for it. And Trump reiterated this at the Republican convention, which, again, nobody seemed to notice other than maybe I was sitting there watching politely. I sang Proud to be an American, parentheses, God bless the USA, with all the other attendees because it's a great anthem, and I've kind of unwillingly memorized the words, so that was fun. But here's something that maybe more people should have noticed.
And then we had that horrible day where soldiers were killed. I was not there because of a ridiculous election. But we had that horrible attack. And they also gave up Bagram, one of the biggest bases anywhere in the world, air bases anywhere in the world, the longest runways, most powerful, hardened, thickened runways. We gave it up. And I liked it not because of Afghanistan. I liked it because of China. It's 1 hour away from where China makes their nuclear weapons. And you know who has it now? China has it now. We were keeping that. And now China is likewise circling Taiwan, and Russian warships and nuclear submarines are operating 60 miles off the coast in Cuba. Do you know that? No, the press refuses to write about it. If that were me running this country and we had nuclear submarines in Cuba, I will tell you that the headlines every day would be, what's wrong with our president? You don't even hear this. You're not hearing about this. Russia has nuclear submarines and warships 60 miles away, Mr. Congressman, from Miami, by the way, happens to be here. Correct? In Cuba. And that would not be stood for if it were somebody else. They don't want to mention it, but now maybe they will. And the entire world, I tell you this, we want our...
Okay, so there's Trump, number one, saying he would have kept a permanent occupation in Afghanistan, and people boo, not because they're booing the concept of a permanent U.S. occupation of Afghanistan, they're booing that Joe Biden withdrew from the Bagram Air Base. Now, I'm no stan of Joe Biden. I think that's probably well established, but Biden did withdraw from Afghanistan, okay? And Trump is saying he wouldn't have done that. He would have kept a force presence, I guess permanently, at the Bagram Air Base because he wants to deter China and he wants to have forces right near China's nuclear arsenal, or at least a part of it. And nobody picks up on this. Not the liberal media, not the conservative media. I guess it falls to little old me. And then Trump is also ranting about Russian warships in Cuba, and he's alluding to some tough action, I guess, he would take on Russia to stop them from transiting various of their military hardware to Cuba, which kind of is what precipitated an earlier Cuban Missile Crisis back in the 1960s. So this is just kind of stuff that, to me, is maddening because it just gets almost no attention in either left or right-wing media or even the so-called mainstream media, because it doesn't really fit with certain narratives that people want to mindlessly push about Trump.
Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.